And that brings me to a trans-specific question on this kind of virtue signaling topic, where, trans people face some truly horrible atrocities in this country. There are reports of trans people being raped and murdered as inmates, and especially when it's trans women being forced into cis male prisons. There are reports of transgender people committing or attempting suicide at much higher rates than cisgender people, both amongst trans youth and adults. But the political discourse seems to be focused around, bathrooms, pronouns, and sports, and sometimes, gender affirming healthcare. And not that these issues aren't important, but, clearly they don't rise to the severity of trans people committing suicide at a very high rate. To talk about issues like these, we have to have a broader conversation about healthcare, criminal justice reform, etc., which means, again, putting your money where your mouth is, right? So do you have a plan to tackle this kind of virtue signaling when it comes to minorities and trans people?
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the broader question first, right? Of like, how does this stuff intersect with healthcare? Because what you see in this country, because it is all kind of tied to, class and identity politics are tied. Because what you see in the country is when you look at things like health outcomes, if you actually take away the top 10% and top 20%, the top 10 or 20% are actually doing fine. Globally, we're doing okay, have some of the highest life expectancies in the world. It's people in the bottom, 50, 60, 70% whose life expectancies are plummeting. And then when you separate that out further and you start looking at the life expectancies of, African Americans, of trans folks, that's even worse, right? And this is the general problem of when you have this very unequal society. Within that inequality exists even starker versions of inequality within these minority groups because of discrimination, because of historical redlining, because of all kinds of systemic barriers of racism. And those systemic barriers are things that, if you make money, you can start trying to overcome it a little bit. But even then, there's plenty of evidence that even at higher income brackets, racism exists, against African-American people and against minority groups. But it's really impossible when you're suffering, from poverty or from a situation where you have a low income situation, right? To dial in on the question of, health for trans folks, I think this is one of those places where the Republicans have decided to just create a wedge issue around, trans people in sports or bathrooms or whatever. It's not even bathrooms anymore because they realize that's a losing battle. And Democrats, instead of us, vocally affirming why we have to actually defend trans people, talking about the fact that suicide rates are so high, actually presenting the evidence of this is a real problem. Trans people are being oppressed. They are struggling in a lot of ways and they're being attacked. That Democrats have this instinct to just like run away in fear and to just kind of slightly adopt the Republican position and hope they don't have to talk about it. It comes down to the fact that they don't really care about, trans lives. Like this is not an issue that they want to actually engage on and really come up with real solutions. We do have to fight for gender affirming care for trans people. We know that works to try to, reduce suicide rates amongst trans people. Right. And at the end of the day, like, we need to actually, I think it's beyond that. We actually have to advocate and talk about how this is an important issue and why it's an important issue at a larger level than allow, the entire fight for trans rights to be boiled down to just trans people in sports or not, right? It's so dehumanizing to turn it into that. And then just say, like, if I take the exact right position on this, I'm good. No, that's not how it works, right? We have to actually, to include everyone in society, we have to fight for everyone's rights.
Yeah, and by ignoring these major issues, Democrats kind of give Republicans ammunition to just dismiss these issues as silly or, as inconsequential. So let's dive into Medicare for all. I'll give you the general and the trans context and here have your thoughts. So it's no secret that the healthcare lobby is one of the most powerful in the country. Even after the whole Mangione issue, and countless other scandals, honestly, UnitedHealth stock just surged 14% again just last week. Nothing seems to stop this industry or the politicians that take their money. So how do you plan on passing Medicare for all in this environment? And to give you the trans context again, specifically when it comes to mental health care, according to a CDC report, trans youths, 1 out of every 4 have attempted suicide, according to this report. And when it comes to trans adults, 82% had seriously considered suicide in their lifetime, and 40% have actually attempted it. These are just staggering numbers. So, what can you tell me about Medicare for all and mental health care?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get Medicare for all passed unless we get rid of the influence of the health insurance lobby
Yeah.
in our country, right? We talked about UnitedHealth stock going up 14%. That happened in part because UnitedHealth just was allowed to do a merger with the second largest home health care provider in the country, right?
Yeah.
And this is after UnitedHealth actually in 2023 they bought the third largest provider of home health care. So they're just expanding. And how are they being allowed to do this? Well, United Health's lobbyist is actually the former employer of Pam Bondi. And so they have a lobbyist that's one of the closest lobbyists to the White House right now. It's just total pay for access based politics. And this is not just something that Trump invented. This is the way lobbying and access in DC has been going on for decades, right? You pay money, you get lobbyists. I remember when I went into AOC's office on the first day that we were doing our sort of inauguration celebration, a T-Mobile lobbyist showed up and tried to talk to me. And he showed me a map of all the T-Mobile offices in our district. And it was like almost like a subtle threat. It's like, these are the people we employ in our district. You don't talk to us. We don't know what'll happen to them, right? I was just like, screw off, right? I know that's not how we engage and negotiate. That's not how you engage. But that's how it works. And the only way to defeat that is if we have to have candidates who go into office, who get into power not through that money, right? So they're not beholden to the health insurance lobbyists. They're beholden to a movement of people who got them there. But I totally believe that's possible. And I actually think, it's not only is it possible, that's the only way we save the Democratic Party. This is the real fight that's going on right now. There is a wing of the Democratic Party that believes their power comes from keeping, the corporate money coffers coming their way. And there's another wing of the party that's saying, no, that way failed. That's why we have Trump right now. We actually need to go in and fix these problems. And right now, the health insurance lobby is standing in the way of that, right? So that's what we have to do. That's the big challenge ahead of us. So I don't think it's going to happen by me going in there and negotiating with these lobbyists and with these corporate-backed Democrats. We have to replace them and threaten their power. But when it comes to attaching this to the larger question of healthcare for trans individuals, I think it's, again, Democrats are coming at this from a place of fear. And I think this is tied to the issue of why Democrats keep wanting to go back to the corporate coffers is they're so afraid of what might happen in this new world. What would happen if we actually had a new world where we passed Medicare for all, where we really defended trans rights, where we really defended, the rights of all people in this country and tried to shoot for that kind of a big goal? It's such a departure from where we are that I think a lot of Democrats just think, oh no, that might go wrong. We can't go that way. But I think we're just at a point where we have to, or we're just slow walking into dystopia for the next 10, 20 years.
Hey there, if you liked that video, then subscribe to my channel, click on the link in my bio to follow me on Instagram, X, and more.